Data is fun. Even though there's so much change, I think trying to put I guess in the UK we say trying to put the blinkers on, which basically just means keeping focused is really good. Like, just because there are 1,000,001 tools coming out every single day doesn't mean you need to know how to use all of them.
Hey nerds, Monica here. Welcome to the Data Podcast for Nerds, where we get to talk to amazing professionals and ask them all about how they use data to solve the world's problems. We're highlighting different skills, different ways that you can use data in the real world. And of course, we have fun bits because we're all nerds and we love to have fun. So today with us, we have Hugo Liu. How are you today, Hugo?
Hello, very well. Very happy to be here.
Good, I'm happy to have you on the show. So we typically start off our episodes by understanding people's origin stories. So if you could, please tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today in your career.
Yeah, no, of course. Probably won't be as exciting as Wolverines. So I'm Hugo Liu. I'm the founder of a company called Orchestra. It's a data release pipeline management platform for data engineers and analytics engineers. But that wasn't always what I've been doing. So my first role in the professional world was actually working as a banker in an investment bank. And after that, I moved to a sort of like strategic role at a company called Juul, which is a vape company. And that was kind of how I fell into data. We were expanding across Europe. We had operations in sort of about a dozen countries, very disparate data sources. So I picked up a bit of data engineering and learned DBT sort of about 4.5 years ago, and haven't really looked back since. In my latest professional role, I was working for a fintech company in London called Kodat. And there, it was a lot of hands-on data engineering, a lot of SQL, a lot of BI, just a lot of data in general. So it's very much my area of interest, shall we say.
Very interesting. So can you expand a little bit about your introduction to data by working at Juul? What kind of data did you work with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was actually brilliant because working in the sort of strategy team, you are doing stuff which is pretty boring. Quite a lot of sort of financial reporting, answering questions like how many Juuls have we sold? Like what type of stalls sell vapes the best? And this was really non-trivial because anyone who's worked in sort of fast-moving consumer goods or supply chain will know. Getting data from random warehouses and stores is hard. And for us, these were often Excel sheets that were, I guess, delivered by hand, or, very large data sets hidden behind sort of like FTP endpoints. So fetching these together was required data engineering, but not the sort of like nice cloud data engineering like on AWS that most of us know and love. But yeah, the main things we were solving were very basic reporting needs.
Yeah. So just curious, what kind of stores are best at selling the tools?
It's the same as with any FMCG product. Those with the best footfall, big stores in train stations, stores in populous areas. These are the best for pretty much everything. There's a high degree of correlation between vapes and other sort of discretionary items too, as you'd imagine.
Okay. Yeah.
Honestly, I know so much about vapes. Too much about vapes.
I bet.
Yeah.
So your introduction to data, it sounded like you started out with Excel as your tool set. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And then you have transitioned into, a lot different tools. What would you say is kind of your advice to people that want to shy away from Excel and get straight into the heavy duty tools?
That is a good question. I don't know if shy away is the right terminology. Excel is great, obviously, but I think the best thing to do is to sort of go after tools organically. So go after tools for the problem you're trying to solve. For me, it was very simple, right? I had 20 Excel sheets. I didn't want to spend all day, every day, manually linking them all together. So I wanted to understand how I could use code to do that, and basically institute processes that would make that process more automated for me. And that was sort of how I learned how to do this sort of very rudimentary Python style data engineering. And when I realized that you could run SQL scripts on something like dbt to automate further analysis in real time, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then stuff which I already knew from university, like knowing a bit of like basic statistics, statistical programming using Python, was then available to me too, because I'd aggregated all this data, I cleaned it, and then I was like, oh well, now I can actually do the stuff which I do know how to do. So yeah, I would say sort of think about the problem it is you're trying to solve and try to solve it in the most automated way you can. Starting with a bit of Python is always a good idea.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for me as well, I started with the Excel and learned my analytical skills from that, and then progressed from there. I've seen some folks, though, they're just like, oh, I have to use Excel, or I kind of want to skip Excel altogether and get into the nitty gritty. And it's like, well, that's a really good foundation to start with, especially since it's like in a lot of organizations still.
Have you ever spoken to people, Monica, who sort of use these like low code platforms like Alteryx?
Yes.
I feel like that's a good way to onboard yourself into sort of more, I guess, advanced or automated tooling.
That's a good kind of interim step as well. Yeah.
Doesn't get a lot of press in the modern data stack debate, unsurprisingly.
It does not. I'm surprised as well. Have you used Excel and Python, that combo? Is it out to the public yet?
Can't say I have. Not really sure. I really, really want to. I'm part of a sort of like school of Excel purists, where I believe the only formulas you need are sort of like plus minus, multiplication, division, and sum ifs.
Okay. I love foundational skills, right? You need to keep these around.
Exactly. Like that is what and always will be Excel is best for. It's financial and operational modeling using sum ifs.
Exactly.
That's what I love it for. I mean, what do you like using it for? Have you tried the Python thing or not?
I have not, unfortunately, yet. I do really want to, though, just to see the capabilities.
Yeah, I feel like it would be potentially quite good for like drawing histograms. I don't know if you've ever tried to draw a histogram in Excel, but it's not fun. You have to like manually set out the bins, and it's especially nerdy. But I guess that's why we're here.
Sure. Yes, exactly. All right, so I understand you clearly have a background in marketing, and we talked a bit earlier about all of these different ways that you can use data in marketing. So I just want to jump into the fun bits off the bat. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So one topic that you had mentioned was about attribution models, where what you can do is look at what really drives people to do things and engage in content. Can you describe these models a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess attribution is the problem of understanding what drives users and prospects to undertake specific actions. And it's complicated because often there are multiple things which make us do something, right? It's like, it's not always the case that we see an advert, we click on it, we go ahead and buy something. Me purchasing like an item off Amazon might be the result of all host of different things over a period of time, right? I might, like, the weather might change, it might get colder, I might see an advert on television for, like a really nice jumper. I might read an article somewhere around how, like, like turtlenecks are in 2023, and then eventually, an advert comes up and I click on it and purchase the jumper. But I guess the problem of attribution is answering the question of whether or not the thing that made me buy that jumper was fully that advert in the end. Because, in that example, it's a combination of factors, right? And, there are lots of sort of clever ways to do this. In that example, you could take the last thing that I did, and that would be last touch attribution. And, under that interpretation, the advert would be the cause of me doing this call to action. But, perhaps if I once, received an email, from a jumper company sort of like 6 months prior, and that was the first touch point the jumper company had with me, then under sort of like first touch attribution, then, the email would be the thing that caused me to do it. But really, you want to do some kind of weighted approach. And there are lots of approaches to these, lots of different functions you can use that apply to various touch points people get over time. But that's sort of the crux of attribution, and sort of three main ways of going about the problem.
Mm-hmm. And then, so lots of data obviously involved. I'm thinking it's a lot of logging type data.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common way to do it is you track events. And these are sort of events on a website. So we're talking now fully in the context of digital marketing. If you think about what happens when you're on like a website, every time you click on something, that's an event. If you sort of stay on a page for more than 5 seconds, that can count as an event. If you scroll down a page, that can count as an event. If you search for something, that can count as an event. And it's sort of like very purist digital marketing approach is to say that the thing I really care about is you clicking on a button or you filling out a form. And, in that case, then that's kind of the event, right? It's like if I click sign up for free, and that's the thing I care about, then that's the action I'll track.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that sort of data, which is really, really useful from a marketing perspective.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting at all of the different types of data that could be captured. So you wouldn't think if you're chilling on a website for 5 seconds that they would be tracking that, or even scrolling down. What about scrolling up? Do you catch scrolling up as well?
Yeah. I mean, like you can do, but I think I feel like e-commerce companies have probably analyzed these sorts of, I guess, like micro actions to death, right? I think the sort of general consensus is the easier you make flows, the shorter you make flows, the more you play on people's psychology. So, for example, having like a progress bar, like keep going, so that you don't, so that when you're like 70% through, you're like, oh, I've almost done. I don't want to end. I'm more likely to finish. Right, playing on those sorts of, psychological cues are, I think, well known to most sort of like people who are very good at rolling out digital marketing funnels now. I think the really interesting data is sort of elsewhere, cross-platform stuff, like I was speaking about earlier.
Okay. Something that just came to mind was eye trackers. So I've seen those eye trackers before. I admittedly don't know how those work exactly, but could those also be incorporated into marketing? See if you looked at the ad specifically.
What exactly is an eye tracker? As in, like, things that track your eyes?
Yeah, so I've only seen it in action, like on Twitch, right? So they were showing the screen and you can see where the person was looking on the screen. However, like I said, I don't know exactly how that works, what kind of equipment's involved or what's captured exactly, but I was just thinking that might be someday, if not already, involved in marketing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be crazy, right? Because
right.
Yeah, of course, because like you can sort of like do stuff mindlessly when you're on a web page, like scrolling or clicking. But if you know where someone's looking, particularly if you know like the order of what they're looking at, right? Then like this is the thing around sort of like eyesight, right? It's like it's continuous. I can't look on the left and then suddenly like look on the right, just like sort of like in a roundabout way. I have to. Well, that's quite a bad point, but the point is, it's like if you know where someone's looking, you know what their thought process is, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I don't know. How come you found it on Twitch? Like, do Twitch gamers use it to like work out what is most like engaging for them?
It was someone that I watched that does those reaction videos.
Okay.
Yeah. nothing spectacular. But it was really
Everyone
neat.
loves a good react video. Who's that? Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast is good. Yeah. It's very popular.
Yeah, I think he's the most popular Mr. Beast.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's really good. He himself is really good at marketing as well, because I've purchased his Mr. Beast burgers, and I also
Really?
have some cookies. I have some cookies in the pantry, his Feastables. The cookies are amazing, by the way.
Yeah, I know. So I recently got a new laptop, and obviously when you get a new laptop, if you don't sort of do the fancy like sync your Google Chrome profiles, it resets all your cookies, right? Which again is actually irrelevant to this because cookies are important for marketing purposes. But anyway, basically YouTube didn't have my cookies, so YouTube was like, "Oh, I don't know what to show Hugo." So it just showed me loads of random stuff, and it showed me Mr. Beast, and I was like, "Jesus, like who is this guy? Like why does he have like 100 million views on every video?" And he's like 25, 26, as you say. He's got these Feastables, which is a line of cookies. He's got Mr. Beast burgers, I think, in the US, which is like a burger chain. And, it's obviously like extremely wealthy. And yeah, like part of me wonders how, like, if somebody who does that actually even bothers to do sort of like data-driven marketing, because like, like again, it's sort of like when it comes to conversion funnels on e-commerce, the playbook is known, right? And it's like when it comes to creating great YouTube videos, like the playbook is known, and it's known, I guess, intuitively, right? So I think I was reading something about him, and he was saying, I spend a lot of money on my videos because I need them to be as viral and as crazy as possible, because that's what drives views, right? It's like, I don't think he's done some sort of fancy regression test, DBT, to, whatever, to kind of work that out, right? It's just, like over a decade of making viral videos. It just, you just know.
Yes. Yeah, his story is rather fascinating. He started, I think, really, really young, like 15 or very, very young, and just being obsessed with YouTube in itself and doing lots and lots of research, him and a couple of friends, and just understanding how the algorithm works and whatnot. And now, however many years later, he's blown up. So did something right.
But it's interesting, right? It's like you can basically win at the marketing game, which is something which is completely data driven, right? It's like you mentioned YouTube's algorithm, right? It's like it is an algorithm. There's an algorithm for Google, there's an algorithm for YouTube, there's an algorithm for LinkedIn. And I guess if marketing is cracking the algorithm, like if you're able to intuitively divine how to do that, it's like, why do we bother with all this data stuff anyway?
Right.
Some people just know.
So there has to be some tooling involved, right, to help you with these types of research. And we talked a little bit about data stacks. Specifically, you were mentioning that like data engineers and software engineers sometimes aren't even required in these marketing channels, right? Because there are tools that are just easy to set up in a non-technical way. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I think, and not to dwell on Mr. Beast too long, but most of us don't operate in that world of, just making viral videos for a living. It seems like most people, 70% of people I know who work in data engineering work in some form of B2B service business. The rest is sort of like B2C. Which means that understanding how we can use our data to essentially drive top of funnel market activity is important. And yeah, you're right. There is a lot of MarTech out there, and it ranges from something which requires absolutely like no software engineering input whatsoever to something where you need a software engineer to implement the tracking in the first place. You need a software engineer to sort of pick it up and transform it and move it around. Yeah, it's really variable. But what's cool is that there are tools out there that mean you don't need to do anything. The most well-known example of this is probably Google Analytics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you must use Google Analytics, right?
Not as often as I should.
Okay.
I should use it more.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a bit of heat recently because they sunset in July Universal Analytics, which was the way it was basically collecting data in favor of GA4, and yeah, I think that basically caused a lot of churn, from what I understand.
Do you use it often, and did that change affect you?
It did, actually, because in my last company, we were using GA to track quite granular activity. And, we were basically getting one row per event, like I was talking about earlier. So every time someone clicks a button or sort of scrolls or does something like that, like get a row of data for it. And this was only accessible via like a specific API endpoint. And, they deprecated that endpoint. So now the only way you can get sort of really granular data from GA4 is to do it all in Google. And starting Orchestra was fun because as someone that has spent many years doing data engineering, it's always quite fun to start something afresh. And it meant that we could kind of choose our own data stack. So, before we were using Snowflake, which meant that if you wanted to export GA4 granular data, you'd have to sort of do quite a lot of data duplication in terms of storage, and then, move it from BigQuery to Snowflake, which is obviously bad practice. But now just sort of playing around and just doing it in BigQuery. So yeah, it's very painless, right? It's like you put a code on a website. Some marketing platforms like Substack even just give you the code, and then you put the code into GA4, press a button, and you've got everything in a data warehouse, which is, and this is also in real time, by the way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Even if it is GA and the sort of data structure is not as good as some things like Snowplow, it's still much better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So with these data folks, engineering folks, you mentioned something around embedding analytics. So having them sit on the marketing team. What exactly does that look like?
Well, I feel like this is probably similar to scenarios where you found yourself before, right? Because didn't you say that you had a sort of background in sort of finance and FinOps?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. But then, presumably there was a time when you were in a role like that, and, you're sort of like we all were once, it was only proficient in doing Excel. And, you were like, oh, I really need to automate this. Like, how do I do that? Right. And that's kind of the point of embedding analysts. It's it's counter to having a data teams almost, because it's just like saying, well, imagine if you were doing your job, but you could use data tools to do it more efficiently. So very similar to actually what I was doing in Joule, which we discussed earlier, right? It's just like, I have to aggregate these 20 Excel files and create a pretty report. How can I do that in an easier way? Yeah. And, like we could talk about this. We can talk about this much more, right? Because I don't know if any of our listeners will have heard of data mesh. It's not a topic which is particularly in vogue this year, but this time last year it was everywhere.
It was.
I mean, what did you think of all of that? I guess now you can call it hype.
I didn't get my head wrapped around it as much as I would have liked to. And it was mostly because I didn't have the chance to really apply it to anything that I was currently working on, because that's my particular learning style. I was attending a lot of conferences at that time, and every other presentation was about that data mesh, right? I thought it sounded really, really interesting in theory, but to really understand how it works, I didn't have something to apply it to, so it kind of didn't stick.
I see. Was there anything in particular about it that you just like? What was it that you couldn't get your head around? Just all of it.
I mean, at this point, I hadn't heard about it in so long that I couldn't really pick something out that I remember to talk about, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This was sort of my first reaction to it as well. The way, I mean, I don't want to make this all about data mesh, but the way I understood it was, rather than have a centralized data team, you have essentially pockets of people that are able to self-serve entire bits of analytics themselves. And I think philosophically, this is like no different to sort of what anyone has been doing anytime, like anywhere, right? It's like, if we use a corporate example, it's like your finance team can tell you what your like revenue retention is, right? Your marketing team can tell you how many signups they get every week, right? That's basically the core tenor of data mesh, and it's got more complicated because there are architectural considerations around what pieces of infrastructure people use to do it. But the whole point is that people are still doing the same. And I think in a sort of pure play data mesh, right, you have an embedded analyst, like someone who maybe works in the marketing team, who's like, I know how to ingest data from third-party SaaS tools into a data warehouse. I know how to use a transformation tool in that warehouse to clean that data. I know how to run a BI report. I know how to automate workflows, maybe by sending events back to HubSpot so that when someone signs up, we send them a marketing email, something like that. It's an interesting concept.
Yes.
And it would be great if every single person was able to simultaneously be an expert in their domain and also have the skills of a data engineer, analytics engineer, and BI developer. Obviously, that would be great.
Yes, exactly. I know, and I feel like we're constantly going back and forth with these types of structures of data teams, as well as just placing different terms, different buzzwords around it, right? Because it could maybe easily have been called embedded analytics too, right?
Absolutely.
And then also what it reminds me of, what you had just said about everyone being able to be the software engineer and the BI developer. And that makes me think of like self-service analytics, right? Because everyone wants to have their hands into it and be able to do everything themselves. But it's like, you have to start at ground zero, have that data literacy, understand things at that foundational level first.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like there's definitely a sort of like timing and growth problem that is sort of involved around here. I mean, I feel like if you think of like a very, very large enterprise, right? So think about like a Fortune 500 company, right? You've got like 30,000 people, like hundreds, if not thousands of different business units. Like they all probably have some kind of like analytical demand, shall we say. And they probably need like a bit of consistency, right? It's like, all the finance teams probably need to be singing from the same hymn sheet, for example, no matter where they are in the world. But, like South Korea, like consumer electronics marketing team, right, can probably operate quite independently from, I don't know, like TV and media Germany, for example, if we think of like Samsung, I don't know. And I think in environments like that, where there's been very little growth or change in terms of what's been going on for the last 15, 20 years, they're kind of like already doing data mesh anyway, right? Because all of these teams self-serve. It's like, yeah, sure, maybe they don't use the modern data stack, but do they really need to? Probably not. Like they've probably used Alteryx to do some kind of Excel automation, and now they all have some nice pipelines which get them to where they need to be. It's more like in tech companies and companies which are growing very fast, new companies that have sort of like sprouted up over the last 5 to 8 years, where there is sort of more room for debate, I guess, in terms of how stuff should be done. But it feels sort of like quite under the surface when you zoom out. I don't know if that was a bit too profound.
I know, my wheels are spinning now. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know I keep talking about Ultrix, but it's because I went to their event yesterday.
Oh, okay. How was that?
Yeah. It was interesting. Obviously, Orchestra is a data orchestration observability platform. They are just a very small set of features in the Ultrix platform, is what anyone there will tell you. And yeah, interesting group of people. I feel like anytime you ask them how they solve a problem, the answer is always the same, which is we just use Ultrix to do it. It's like, yeah, I get that, but like, how do you do it?
How?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not a satisfying answer. But it floats a lot of people's boat, is what I've learned. And getting people off it is hard. So yeah, kudos. Like, it's been around for a very long time. It has $500 million in revenue. That's bigger than any modern data stack company. So the proof is kind of in the pudding. Well, I say that it's not as big as Snowflake or Databricks.
True.
Yeah. But
they're moving fast, though. I have seen a lot from them.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think definitely on the sort of like operational side, I'm hearing more about sort of like operational leaders and chief data officers who are more invested in problems of people and operations and process talk about tools like Snowflake more. Less so for Databricks. I feel their core focus is still, well, not core focus, but the area people like the most in is still data science and machine learning, but maybe not in marketing. There's not enough marketing data.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think it would be quite interesting to see if there are actually any embedded analysts in marketing teams using high-tech tools like Databricks. I'd be very surprised.
A little callback to how to solve problems. Yes. And what I like to ask all of my guests is, how do you learn new things? If there's something that you are very new to, something just comes out, what are your go-to resources for learning?
Ooh, can I say ChatGPT?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, as a sort of founder of a company, you wear many hats. And something I've realized is, normally if I was learning something new, just sort of go from first principles, just spend a load of time reading about it and doing it and sort of work it out. But, with this, like, I really can't. So, for example, our team are all basically software engineers, and our core focus is building product. So I have technical background. I'm a data engineer. I can write Python, but I've never written software before. So working out how to actually do that properly, do things like writing tests and just various programming conventions requires a combination of stuff, right? It requires using a bit of ChatGPT, like a bit of first principles, obviously like speaking to people, doing stuff like working out how to tell HMRC, who are Her Majesty's Revenue Commission, I think, basically like the government, working out how to tell them that you've done some like important company paperwork, and learning how to register that is like, I can't use ChatGPT for that. I have to ask people, and normally just pay people to do it because it's actually just really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking to people, learning things from first principles, bit of open AI, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say they're the main three.
I'm still really hardcore into Google searches. I haven't fully transitioned into ChatGPT quite yet.
You will.
I will.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on data engineering LinkedIn courses?
I have not touched that world. No.
Okay, I see.
No.
Yeah, I'm interested to get people's thoughts on those.
Okay. Well, if anybody does know about data engineering courses, contact Hugo.
Well, like I think it's important, right? And I think if you're listening to this and you're a sort of data practitioner, you'll appreciate that the best way to learn how to do stuff, particularly in data, is just like really get hands-on and dirty and like do it. But equally, working at a company seriously confines you to like your sort of set of experiences, right? So the question is, I've worked in company X, we do it this way. I want to know how other people do it. Like, is this the only way? What's the best way? How should I think about this? And I feel like courses promoted on LinkedIn often profess to, be able to give like a really good like holistic overview for those, but I just don't know because I've not done any. I feel like the only other way to do it is to listen to people give talks, but that's also quite unsatisfying because it's a talk is normally relatively high level, right? Even a technical talk.
Yeah. So really hands-on stuff for me to apply it to something. That's when it solidifies. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Sort of like muscle memory.
Yes. Yeah. Well, do you have any final words of encouragement or maybe recommendations for the listeners?
Words of encouragement. Yeah, keep going. Data is fun. Even though there's so much change, I think trying to put I guess in the UK we say trying to put the blinkers on, which basically just means keeping focused is really good. Like, just because there are 1,000,001 tools coming out every single day doesn't mean you need to know how to use all of them. I think the fundamental tenets of sort of building robust data pipelines with lots of testing, continuous data integration, continuous data development. These are the sort of like fundamental principles that will guide you towards what's right, no matter what is sort of going on in the hype. I think in terms of advice, there are lots of awesome resources out there, but as I said before, I think getting your hands dirty is good. Something which we've not spoken about is sort of like learning resources. There are many good blogs out there. I think many of them give you enough material to sort of do interesting projects yourself. I also have one, shameless plug, but that has some decent stuff in it. But the resources I think are really interesting are like sort of like papers, like academic papers, which are slightly adjacent to data. Like, I'd highly recommend people search up the Elastic Data Warehouse, the Snowflake one from 8 years ago, because I think understanding architecture and stuff like that is just generally quite awesome.
I almost wore my Elastic Stack shirt. Now I'm thinking I should have.
Oh no. Well, that's the thing, right? It's like some people use the term elastic, some people use the word serverless. It all depends on your ideology.
It does. And the terms are changing all the time too. So
well, exactly. This is why it's important to understand it from the start, right? It's like it helps you realize that when there are 5 new products and they're all called something which is a synonym for elastic, or like serverless, or like I don't know, I can't think of any synonyms now, but guarantee that one of those synonyms will be the next hot thing in data 2024.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Hugo, for coming on the show. If any of the folks out there listening have any questions for you, where can they find and/or follow you?
So you can find and/or follow me on LinkedIn or Medium or Substack. I don't recall all of my URLs for all of these, but we will share these in the comments, I guess.
Yes, I'll find them and put them in the show notes. Yes,
absolutely. And if anyone's interested in Orchestra, that's just getorchestra.io. But our website is work in progress.
Well, thank you again for coming on the show, Hugo.
Monica, thank you so much for having me. It's been good. It's been wild.
Absolutely. And as always, folks, happy learning.
Happy learning.